Come here, little. Hey, how's it going? Good morning, Vietnam. That was an old Robin Williams joke. That's not very funny. Robin Williams was a late comedian, had a way of making unfunny things funny. I'm sure, but he's actually also really, really funny. So, yeah, poor Robin Williams. Not around anymore. An amazing guy, amazing goodwill, all had by all. I mean, I loved Robin Williams. He was an amazing person. And anyway, I'm just so pleased that I got to see a lot of his work and enjoy a lot of his movies and see many of his comic routines, and just to get to be with him while he was in the world. In fact, one of my favorite movies that he did was Dead Poet Society. I guess he did sort of a lot of educational type films, surprisingly or interestingly. I also liked the movie Patch Adams. I thought that was really good. And there was a movie though that he did that I did not see. Oh, I forget what the name of it was. But anyway, apparently I'm thinking about Robin Williams today. Why is that? I'm not so sure. So today is the 16th of April, 2019. It is the day after tax day, April 15th. This, Emily, probably has no meaning to you. It probably won't begin to have meaning to you until after you graduate college, which is fine. So I hope you're doing well. I hope you're enjoying your spring break. I've been thinking about my spring break, or at least the things that I do while Emily is on her spring break. And I'm gonna go. I'm planning on going to the Spring Fest here in Lompoc this weekend, and in fact, I'm getting pretty serious about the idea of going to get a carnival ride ticket and an unlimited pass on the carnival rides. And I'm thinking about inviting some folks to go do the carnival rides with. So that sounds like fun to me. And I've not done the carnival rides at the carnival. And so I'm kind of excited about doing things like the Gravitron and or I don't know what they call it these days, like the barrel. I'm not sure what the rides are called, but there's going to be like Ferris wheels and there's going to be like spinning things. So, one thing that concerns me a little bit about these rides is that, they're rolling over the road all the time, and, maintenance there. It's harder to maintain a ride that's got a lot of moving parts and that's rolling over the road than one that's stationary, right? Things are moving around, bouncing around. I can imagine just from a logistical standpoint, how tough it might be to, I guess, ensure maintenance on the rides. I don't know. We'll see. I'll take a look at them and maybe we'll get on them and give them a try. So anyway, I've been thinking about doing that, going on some rides at the local Spring Fest. I think that might be a lot of fun. Maybe I can take my camera and take some photographs of the rides. I've been thinking a lot about photography, in fact, Em. And I think what I want to do is I want to learn how to use my DSLR camera better. Actually, I don't own a DSLR. I own a mirrorless camera, but it's got, good sized body on it with a lens. And I want to give it I want to learn more about how to use that camera. I want to figure out how I can use exposure and ISO and aperture to make my photographs amazing. I'm listening outside right now, and it's really windy. I mean, I can hear the wind just blowing out there. Wow. Wind is wonderful in many respects and not so wonderful. It's kind of fun to play in the wind. I don't know if you get a lot of opportunities to play in the wind, but wind is fun. March is the month when there are a lot of kites that are flying. People are flying kites. The weather is pretty decent, and it's definitely shaping up. And with the wind blowing out there, man, it's really ideal times to fly a kite. And so that's kind of neat. I've been seeing some amazing kites that kids have got these days. These kite designers are really on point, figuring out what kids want to see on their kites as they fly them in the sky. And I've just been seeing like really cool designs of like animals and cute things that people are, uh, flying kites with pictures on them. It's pretty amazing. Oh boy, so many. It's kind of funny. Life is such that there are so many things that I want to do. Like I've been reading more, and at least I've made a commitment to myself to read more. I've been meditating recently, which has been a real change. Meditation is kind of interesting because I'm sort of on again and off again with meditating, and I don't really spend a lot of time doing it, but I'm beginning to realize its utility. And here's why. I've gotten the idea that a lot of problems that arise in people's psychology has to do with how they are sort of creating behaviors. And these behaviors can become automatized, and these behaviors can be not just physical behaviors, but uh, sort of thinking behaviors. You know, and it's sort of like, what I mean is that there are human beings, I think, unnecessarily act. They act unnecessarily in ways through their body, and they act unnecessarily in ways through their mind. And it's these. It's almost as if human beings sort of are calling to action their bodies and their minds, and they're doing so for reasons that are, I don't know. I honestly, I don't know why. I think people sort of recognize that they want their lives to be different, right? There's a lot of shoulds, and there's interests. People want a lot of different things, and they think that by activating their minds and their bodies, that'll increase the chances that they'll get what they want. And in many cases, that's the case. Many cases, that's true. But in some cases, it's not so true. And then this, I think a lot of the problems that human beings have can be attributed to this unnecessary activation of emotion, activation of thought, um, making, activation of behavior. And I think I would guess that maybe 20% of that action is effective, and 80% of it is less effective or not effective at all. Or how should I say, not just effective, but functional. 20% is functional, 80% not so functional. Yeah. I mean, people even admit this to themselves and to others in conversation, and regularly they talk about thoughts that enter their minds that aren't helpful. Quite often they're judgmental or critical, self-critical thoughts. And, it just occurs to me just how unnecessary a lot of this thinking is, that there doesn't seem to be any real value or purpose in it. And so I want to contrast that practice with meditation, which is, for me, the way I'm understanding it now is really sort of a release of sort of the forcing of the generation of these thoughts and behaviors. It's sort of like just allowing yourself to be fallow. Fallow ground is ground that is not worked. It's ground that hasn't been seeded or tilled. It lies fallow. That means that there hasn't been any activity upon it used to increase its productivity. And I kind of like that idea. I think the brain can be helped. The way I understand it is that human beings are continuously shaping their mind. They're shaping their behavior. And, culture continually does this. And we're always sort of coordinating our actions, consistent with sort of living and thriving in the world. We're continuously being conditioned, our bodies and our minds. And that's because we're continuously registering feedback about our behavior from our external world. And we're learning. Human beings have brain neurons that are all about, feedback response. And so this process is continuous. And I think that it's nice to give the nervous system a break. Yeah, particularly areas like the amygdala areas. That's an area of the brain that is focused on alerts and alarms, and is quite often the result, sort of creates the anxiety response. And, I have a feeling that a lot of sort of unnecessary behaviors, unnecessary thinking, unnecessary physical behaviors is a result of amygdala, of sort of the amygdala just sort of butting in. That's what it does. It's sort of like an interrupt. It's sort of it's like the body's alarm system, right? Alarms, when you set them, sort of override the current stream of thought and sort of creates a pattern interruption. And, this is great if you're in a condition where you're under stress, in a situation where you're under stress or in a difficult environment. But if you're not in a challenging environment, a lot of that is just unnecessary. And I think can, be somewhat stressful if you're continuously shifting around from topic to topic. Anyway, so that's my thinking right now. So I think there's a lot of value to be had in just relaxing, ease in terms of triggering behavior and thoughts. And that's why I think meditation has value. Yeah. At least I'm curious to see what might be on the other side of, say, allowing our mental processes and our behavioral processes to lie fallow, to lie undisturbed. And I have a feeling that it might create more peace. I mean, the word peace, almost by definition, means a relaxation of behavioral and automatic thinking. Yeah. It it implies uh, sort of relief and a release from continuous triggering and continuous struggle. And yeah. So anyway, what is today's video about? Let's find out. Let's see. Here we go. So, growing up, what was your favorite comic strip? Okay, my favorite comic strip growing up. Well, to answer the question explicitly, I would say my favorite comic strip was Dilbert. Dilbert. That's right. Now, Dilbert is the name of a computer engineer in the comic strip. He's the main character. And Dilbert's story, the comic strip story, is about how the computer engineer, the computer programmer, functions in the office. I think in a way, the author of Dilbert is parodying uh, business culture. He does that a lot. He talks about management buzzwords. I'm talking about the comic strip author. He pokes fun at a lot of business ideas. And, I think growing up, at least when I was in college, I would say that Dilbert was probably my favorite comic. Now, before college, let's say high school, I remember there was a time that I really liked the Garfield comic strip. Why? I'm not sure. I also have a tendency just to read Peanuts comic strips all the time. Not that Peanut strips are very funny, because for some reason, Charles M. Schulz was not the funniest, most humorous guy in the world. In fact, I think Mr. Schultz had depression for a little while. And it sure does show. It sure does. Charlie Brown is not the happiest of characters. In fact, Charlie Brown, to me, my perception of his persona is that he's one blue guy. He's downtrodden by a lot of things. And, it's in a way curious that he'd be the subject of a comic strip. But one thing I do like about Peanuts is the character development. Peppermint Patty, and there are all these other characters who have certain traits that are identifiable, and there's storylines associated with it, and that maybe just the character creation, the character development is why I like Peanuts so much, or at least maybe why I read Peanuts so much. The fact is that Peanuts as a comic strip was just really popular. It was like sometimes the very first comic strip on the page of comic strips. Maybe even one of the ones that it was one at the one at the top. And it may have even been in, I don't know. It just always seemed to be one of the most prominent ones. Other comic strips that I liked growing up. Well, I read comic books. I liked reading the Archie comic books. And I think my mom bought them at the grocery store. And I don't think it was necessarily mostly my desire that the Archie comic books were bought, but it could have been. Maybe my brothers, Enrico or Marcos, were instrumental in asking mom for the Archie comic books. Maybe I did too, but they used to be available at the grocery store, and they were in book format. They were in paperback book format, and I think I pretty much devoured those comics. They were pretty cool. I liked the Archie comic books. And you would not do yourself a disservice, Emily, if you spent some time tracking down Archie comic books and taking a look inside and seeing if those cartoons appeal to you. I know that when I was a kid in high school, those comics were relevant. Archie was talking about girls and dating, and he was hanging out with his friend. Um, Jughead. I think Jughead was his name. Archie and Jughead. And I don't know. There was just something about the comic book that I liked. What I liked about the comic book or the comic strip Archie was that I just liked the pictures. I liked the drawings. I liked just the way the characters were drawn. I thought they were drawn nicely with creative style, and some of the characters were drawn in an elegant way, and I really enjoyed it. And I thought the banter, the communication between the characters was enjoyable to read. So Archie was definitely one of the comic strips that I like to read. I never really got into comic strips like Doonesbury. Doonesbury had a political slant, and there were characters in it that I didn't quite understand. One was an adult with glasses on. The other one was a penguin. I just never really got it. I never figured it out. And the comic strip was actually quite dry quite often, and often the comic book characters were just sort of ranting about political developments, and they were trying to be insightful, I'm sure, and comic, but it never really, honestly, just never really amused me very much. And so I never really went, sort of fell for Doonesbury and enjoyed it. Although Doonesbury had a huge following, I think it maybe might have had a following that rivaled even Peanuts in terms of comic strips. And I have a feeling that people who liked Doonesbury were people who paid attention to politics, paid attention to, say, economics. I know there were some themes of the comic strip that related to philosophy and meaning and purpose, things like that. I think another character was a tiger. So there was this old guy with glasses, a tiger, and a penguin. Like, I was not able to put those characters together into any kind of coherent whole. I'm not sure if Doonesbury refers to a person or it refers to a town. So I never really did get into the Doonesbury comic, and it probably shows, given how little I'm able to relate about how that story made sense. So, what other characters did I liked? I liked reading Dennis the Menace. In fact, those comics were pretty insightful. Here's the thing. I didn't read a lot of newspapers. My dad, however, did read newspapers, and I'm grateful to him for having, on occasion, newspapers lying around. It was interesting to take a look at and read. I think my dad was interested in newspapers because of the classified section. He was always interested in sales or bargains or what was going on in town from a business perspective, I think. Of course, we were living in Taos at the time, and Taos is not only where I grew up, but it was the city or the town where my dad grew up. So my dad knew a lot of people in the town, and a lot of those people were his friends or acquaintances. And so every time he'd pick up the paper, he would learn something new about what his friends were doing, and maybe what possible business opportunities were available. And so for him, reading the paper was a very functional activity, particularly reading the classifieds, where my dad could wheel and deal and make money for his large family of 6 kids. So yeah, I had the chance to look at the paper a few times. And but I think generally I didn't necessarily follow comic strips religiously. The comic strip was never the reason for me to buy a newspaper. It was always some other reason. So were comic strips in newspapers a big part of me growing up? Well, not so much. If there was any kind of comic strip that was a big part of me growing up, I would say that it would probably be Archie and Jughead. Yeah. Now that's comic strips I'm talking about. Another very strongly related genre are comic books, right? Now, I grew up collecting some comic books. I collected Thor for a while, Daredevil for a while. I collected X-Men and Aquaman and Sectars, and I remember Balder the Brave and Aquaman. Did I say Aquaman already? Daredevil. I even like the Marvel Universe. A lot of those comics I collected, and I have really sort of like an emotional bond to those comic books because I love them so much growing up. Yeah, I remember reading like Spider-Man comic books and just loving what I read. Ooh, and another enjoyable comic book character that I liked was Black Panther. As a kid, thankfully, I had money to spend on comic books, and I had a shoebox. And the shoebox, I think I might have even had 2 shoeboxes that were filled with comic books, and they were just so fun to read. I loved looking at all the supernaturally strong characters like Thor and all the characters with superhuman abilities like Aquaman. And I can remember first of all, they were works of art. They were so beautiful. At least back then, they were beautiful. They were just pen and ink drawings, and they were just gorgeous. And it was fun to read the comics from scene to scene. Those images I can imagine, the thought bubbles and the spoken word bubbles. I have a lot of very pleasant memories of just as a kid reading comic books, pulling out the old shoebox and reading comic books for hours. It was a good time. And there was also a time when I would engage in creative play, where I would sort of create my own comic book superheroes. I would pull out a piece of paper and a pencil and a crayon, maybe, and I would just create superheroes, and I'd create diagrams and drawings of weapons and cars and all kinds of neat things. And I would literally create these worlds. I would have sheets and sheets of paper, maybe 5, 6, 7 sheets of paper. And what I would do is I would take the paper, I'd throw it down on, say, the top of a comic book. And I would trace out, by looking through the paper, trace out the figure. And then I would create a diagram where I would show new weapons or new armor or new capabilities, right? This would be like this visor would be electromagnetic radiation. It could see the entire spectrum, or there would be like super duper weapons on this guy's arm or something like that. And I would, draw arrows and write descriptive paragraphs of what this thing or that thing was. So, as you can tell, I was influenced by comic books, and it was fun. I had a good time. It was a period in my life when I was really creative and, just enjoyed sort of expressing myself and then showing my designs to my brothers and my parents. And it was fun. It was a good time. I like creating those superhero worlds. Yeah. So when it comes to comic strips and comic books, I enjoyed them when I was growing up. And in fact, to some extent, I'm kind of curious whether you're interested in the comic strips in either the newspapers or comic books right now. I know in the past I have thought about various card games like Pokemon the card game and Magic the card game. I wonder if you're interested in either of those games. I know I personally have played both, and I can be a reasonable opponent in both of those card games. So, Emily, if you ever have a desire to either learn how to play those games or you want to play those games somehow, I would totally be up for it. In fact, I've got a Pokemon card deck in my car right now. I carry it in the far back of my car, and I might very well have Magic the card game up in my cabinets here in my home. But then again, maybe not. You know, here's the thing about those card games. They take time to learn and to get good at, right? And here's the thing too. I only find those card games moderately stimulating just in general. For me, they're interesting and exciting, but they've never really gotten to the point of me being obsessed with them at all. Yeah, not like some people. What's interesting is that I've grown older. It's become harder for me to read the very fine print on the cards. So I need to wear reading glasses when I'm playing, because I don't know if you've checked those cards out lately, but those fonts are really tiny. I mean, they're like 2 point, 3 point, 4 point, 5 point, maybe 6 or 7 point fonts, which is super duper tiny fonts. You sort of have to have eagle eyes to read what's on the card. I understand it. You got to these card games are card games where basically the rules change with every card that gets played. And so you need a way to write down the rules. And sometimes the rules can get pretty complicated and you need space. And so it totally makes sense for them to reduce the font size of the type. Yeah. So I'm kind of curious, what kind of games or like board games are you playing right now? I know for a while you used to enjoy puzzles like Rubik's Cube and like the Rubik's Snake and the Rubik's Triangle. I'm curious if you're still into that kind of stuff. Or maybe if you're still into puzzles, what kind of puzzles are you into? I think I remember it one time there were these, you may have been interested in these like metal pieces that fit together in certain shapes. Sometimes you can pick up puzzles like that at restaurants where they're essentially brain teasers. And I wonder to what extent your mechanical ability has improved as a result of your interest in puzzles. I remember I bought you a puzzle that was an orb. It's essentially a sphere, and inside it had like a stainless steel ball. And the point of the puzzle was to get that ball through sort of a number of obstacles, and you would get that ball through a number of obstacles by rotating and revolving the ball. And I'm curious if you're still into that kind of stuff. Who knows? Who knows what you're into now? I'm really not quite sure in what games you find enjoyment, whether it's video games or board games. I know when you were a kid, we used to play checkers a lot. And you know what? I'm guessing that you and I would, um, when we would play, um, we would have like, I would guess from a like who won and who lost. I think it was like 50-50%. I would let you win a lot of the time. Because one thing I recognized about you in games was that you were very focused on wanting to win the game. Really focused. I think you were really competitive. And anything, I know you really wanted to win the game. Winning was really, really important to you. And I remember that being the case when we were playing Candyland and when we were playing Chutes and Ladders, that winning was important to you. And I recognized that early on, and I let you win a lot, a lot. And, that's great. I wonder if that sense in you is still going strong. I wonder if you're still focused on winning games and stuff. I personally have never really been very competitive. Well, actually, I think I was a lot more competitive when I was younger. When I was in middle school and high school, pretty competitive. I began to get less competitive in college. I think I began to realize that, every single person has skills and abilities and knowledge that's unique to them. And this whole idea of competing on a certain playing field, even if it was a level playing field, it indicated to me, well, not that much. There were always other games that, if one person won this game, another person would win this game because of some skill or attribute or knowledge that the other person had. I guess I got to thinking that when it came to games, whether people won or lose was not essential. And because I know that even the best players, say in poker, lose because of, circumstances that are beyond their control. There's some poker players, there's just, you get dealt a random hand and you do the best with the hand that you've got. And particularly in poker and blackjack, and I think really the good players and the bad players, what separates them is how they play, how much they win over the long term, right? Out of how many games they win over 50 games or 100 games or 200 games. It's not like any one single game or skill at any one single game can, and any instance of a played game, that's not very telling, because there's just randomness is built into a lot of games. Games of chance. And so, in fact, there are card games and other games that are more reliant on random chance rather than the skill of the player. I think that's part of the reason I like video games so much. One thing about video games is that frequently, whether you are good or bad at video games, depends on your skill level, which can be developed over time. And, there's real skill involved quite often. There's knowledge, there's experience that's derived from playing a lot of games. And, there's I would say less random luck about whether a person lives or dies when playing a video game. And so I like that. I like that for the sense of skill building that video games can bring. as opposed to say card games. Yeah. Now I'm not saying that uh, card games. I'm not sort of throwing shade at card games. Card games are fine. They're just not my kind of game. I'm not necessarily a numbers guy where I find doing lots of basic calculations like counting to 21 or counting to 7. I just don't find that particularly entertaining or enjoyable. There's not a lot of meaning that can be brought, at least into me, when I consider, say, creating like a pair or some kind of grouping of subgrouping of cards. It's just not. It is about pattern matching. And while I'm pretty good at pattern matching, I'm not that great. I still have trouble with games like Yahtzee and stuff like that, where the game is really just about pattern recognition and probability, and I don't know how things will unfold over time. Let's see, what's the next question? What is another question that would be interesting, perhaps? What was an act of kindness that you offered or received? An act of kindness. Well, maybe I can think about acts of kindness that were on display at Lucidity Music Festival last weekend. Well, there were a lot of acts of kindness. People in general were really nice to me. They were open and willing to play and hang out, and we were all, willing to dance with one another. It was a blast. It was just fun. And it's nice to be in those environments where, people are open to being kind and sort of participate with you playing together in an unscripted way. And, we did this through conversations and experiments and play and dance and I don't know. So, that in itself is a kindness. There's like this kindness sort of starts, there's like a 0th step. I mean, if there were like 4 steps to doing a kind of behavior, the very first step, or even just the initial step before the first step, the 0th step would be just sort of this intent to live without judgment and sort of an intent to sort of be willing and open to and being kind, right? It's like being kind on purpose. Sort of, it's also about giving people the benefit of the doubt, right? Recognizing that people all around you are doing the best they can, and just not being so quick to judge, letting other people shine in your presence, and assuming the best, right, about another person and your interaction with them. It's just about giving of yourself, giving of your warmth and whatever gifts you have to give, what skills that you have to offer, and volunteering that. I like that. I like that kindness and goodness. It's like an intentionality. I think they also call it like consciousness, but this is a sort of an alternative meaning to the word consciousness. Anyway, I appreciate it. That's something that's really nice about what I'd call music concert culture. It's people who are, I don't know, just willing to be a little bit more nice, willing to be friendly, willing to strike up conversations, open to visiting with others, and I don't know. I think it's nice. I like being in that environment. And I want to try to seek out and be in that environment more of the time. Yeah. And, I'm really thankful that the self-help and self-development community exists. I'm really thankful that, the thing is, our society is so developed and we're doing so well that we don't all necessarily have to struggle to get the proper amounts of food in our bodies and the amounts of water in our bodies. So we are really free to play a little bit. Even, a lot of our work is play. I mean, a lot of the work that we do is somewhat unnecessary, right? We do it for enjoyment's sake mostly. And, I'm glad to live in a world where that's possible, where we're not necessarily surviving in sort of a way where we're always at tooth and nail with one another, competing for resources. There's plenty to go around. Human beings like doing work. We want to do stuff. We want to be productive. We want to matter. We want to belong. And we're willing to take action in order to sort of ensure that the group does a good job, right? The group does a better job. I like being a human for that reason. Human beings. I mean, if you look around me, all this stuff I did not build. Like, I've got a dining room table over there. I didn't build that dining room table. I did not build the chairs. I did not. I did not plumb the natural gas from the natural gas line to my indoor heater. I did not build the electrical infrastructure that allows my microwave oven to work. I did not construct my water heater that allows me to take nice warm showers, but somebody did. Someone's time and energy was taken up assembling my computer, and then mining all of the materials out of the earth to make my computer. Copper just doesn't appear. Copper is an element that is found in the earth, deep in the earth, in the copper ore, which needs to be smelted, melted down, crushed, melted down, and the metal needs to be, fashioned into a wire that's useful according to standards and rules. And, people are helping other people. Like, a lot of the things in my life, like some of the things like plastics, for example, people had to, sort of arrange to have those petrochemicals mined out of the ground and then transported and then converted into useful materials. And then they've got to be all by plastic. The plastic objects around me have to be fashioned into some useful thing, like a Wi-Fi router, cable, things like that. So, I really appreciate human beings and our ability to just sort of help each other out. And I'm sure that I've done things that have helped people over the years to get their work done. And, I'm grateful to be useful to them. It's part of this whole project of civilization that is unfolding before us right now. And, I'm a part of it, and you're a part of it too, Am. And, we're part of this greater whole of humanity that's trying to work out the various problems. And I think generally we're doing pretty good. There's some areas that we could use we could work on, like climate change and pollution, particularly like microplastics and things like that. Also limited resources relating to mined materials. I think we all need to do a better job when it comes to helping maintain the habitats of the various animals that are in our ecosystem. You know, I the other day when I was driving alongside the road, I saw a deer, a baby deer. I don't know if it was a baby deer, but it was a juvenile deer that was struck down, killed by a car or a truck, lying beside the road. And my heart just goes out to that young deer. In a way, we were sort of trampling in their habitat with our road and our vehicles, and or maybe, I don't know, maybe they were trespassing on our habitat. I don't know. All I know is that you know animals in particular, they are, especially larger animals, are threatened with extinction, um, because of problems with, um, sort of problems related to reducing habitats. Yeah, and I don't know what to do with the habitat problem. Human beings are continuing to have children. The population on the earth is continuing to rise. The population in the state of California is continuing to rise. And I think even the population in Santa Barbara County is continuing to rise. And so what that means is the human population. And what that means is that there are going to be more and more threats to the habitat of animals and plants. And that's tragic. What that means is death, and dying, and extinction. And what it also means is less biodiversity. Human beings and the growth of human beings has become like a monoculture, right? And wouldn't it be nice if we could figure out a way to create more habitat for the humans and animals that survive on this planet? The idea that's coming to mind right now is like underground cities. I mean, wouldn't it be neat if human beings just lived underground? That would be fine. And then we could preserve the habitat on the surface of the planet for all the animals and plants in the world. Because I want to keep those around too. That is part of our heritage as living things, as biological entities. You know, the that those niches in the ecosystem are important, and each one of those beings have an important role to play, a role that's been defined over hundreds of thousands of years. And I hate to see that go away. I mean, that's really important. I mean, a lot of the lessons that human beings learn in the world are derived from nature, solutions that nature has come up with. And I hate to see even one living creature lose their lives as a result of human beings and their mismanagement of the environment. Yeah, it's really a modern day tragedy. And I've heard about this like the sixth mass extinction that human beings are involved in the present day. Regrettably, and I think it's true, is that human beings are making it happen. We're catalyzing this sixth mass extinction of the planet. And I know human beings do the best they can, and quite often we're short-sighted. We're continuously trying to make improvements in the way the world works, and sometimes those improvements are relative. They're improvements in the sense that they satisfy human needs, but they don't necessarily satisfy animal needs or insect needs or plant needs, or even the needs of viruses and bacteria, eukaryotes and prokaryotes. um, and it's tragic. It's tragedy. There particularly when it comes to climate change. That is the tragedy that's happening right now, where we are creating stresses on basically all of the world's habitats at once when it comes to increasing of, say, heat on the planet, just in general. I mean, all the animals are affected. And if it's, if animals need to forage for food and it's too hot to forage, then those animals seek shelter. But as a consequence of their seeking shelter, that means they've got less time to hunt. And that means that some animals will be more prone to starving, right? Ones that are sensitive to the heat. I mean, it's just a continuous tragedy to see and to hear and even to think about all the animals that are being affected by these changes in climate. And, it saddens me about the huge losses that people are taking right now, that not just us, but also future generations are taking right now. Thankfully, there are millions of species of plants and animals. But, before things start getting any better, I have a feeling they're going to get a lot worse. And they might even get catastrophically worse. And, I think we've already seen reductions in the numbers of insects, not just 10 or 20 or 30%, but like 50% reduction in some insects. These are some of the numbers that I'm seeing coming off the internet, coming off the newswire services. I mean, that tragedy alone is just outrageously problematic. And I sure hope that human beings come up with some kind of strategy that we can agree on to sort of help reduce this damage to our ecosystems that's occurring right now. Yeah. So, I'm going to wrap up this video. I just want to let you know, I want to make sure that I mention how much I love you and cherish you, and then also how much I'm committed to you and your continued development and unfolding as a young person. And, I'm really curious in what ways, what areas you're focusing now. And because, I want to sort of, I don't know, I just want to acknowledge that, I want to be present to it. I want to validate those interests that you have, and just help you understand yourself more and learn and grow. And I also want to help you exercise your autonomy and freedom and your ability to be strong in the face of adversity. And all these things are important to me. And so I just want you to know that my heart is in a good place. I'm all about being a resource to you and sort of being an assistance to you, in the way that you want me to assist you. I'm happy to stand in any position that you'd like me to stand that you think would serve you the most. And whether that's giving you dollars or giving you my time or giving you my attention or giving you my energy in a certain way. Maybe it's just the energy in my communication, the energy in my letters, the energy in my text messages, maybe my photographs or my movie videos. I don't know what area of our interaction you derive the most pleasure from, what makes your life most wonderful, but I would like to know what parts of my expression and interest that you derive the most benefit from, so that I can give you more. Because the fact is, I want to give it to you. I want to help you identify your needs, and then I want to help satisfy those needs. In fact, you may not know this, Emily, but the case is that if you needed me or wanted me in some capacity, I would drop everything in my life in that moment and come to your side and be a partner and supporter to you. And might be at any time. If it is at 1 a.m. in the morning, or 5 a.m., or maybe it's over a period of time. Maybe it's over a period of 7 days or 14 days or something like that. If there's any way that I can help you achieve the values that are important to you, to help you explore and unfold and grow and develop and even transform into the amazing woman I know you can become. If there's any way that I can help you do that, whether it's by becoming more part of your life or becoming less a part of your life, let me know. Anyway, I hope you have a wonderful day today. I hope you have a fantastic spring break week, which is just getting underway. We're almost in the early phases, but we might be in the middle phase soon, as early as tomorrow, of your spring break. And I hope you're having an enjoyable time, relaxing in the midst of this time off. And I guess I'll talk to you later. All right. I love you very much. Bye-bye.